Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I've had several people ask me in the last few days if I could discuss how do you train when you come back off of a deload. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. All right, the short answer, and then I'm going to get into a very long, detailed answer so that people can understand why you would do this for people who don't grasp it. When you come off of a deload, you need to return to your workloads and your intensities gradually and work it back up over 2 or 3 weeks. All right, you don't come back full steam after a deload, particularly when a deload's been scheduled due to planned overreaching or due to connective tissue stress and pain and things like that that's caused you to have to deload. You're going to make the best progress if you start with moderate intensities and workloads and then build back up from there. In fact, you will start stimulating growth again in the returning week, even if you work with workloads that are lower than some of the peak weeks you did in the weeks before the deload. Actually, you'll be able to stimulate growth, and I'm going to get into why. I know this doesn't go contrary to progressive overload. So to understand why that is, you have to understand how planned overreaching and underreaching work and how dual factor recovery models work. And this is, again, a little complicated, but I think most people will be able to grasp this if you just stop and think about it for a little bit. All right, when we talk about overreaching is the state to where you, over the course of several weeks and sometimes even several months, you increase workloads and the training loads and training volume that you're subjecting your body to the point to where it can no longer recover from that training from session to session. Right? And basically you accumulate fatigue and you accumulate basically a recovery debt. And it's not to say that you won't continue to get stronger, perform better, gain muscle, things like that during the overreaching phase, but you will reach a point to where it will regress and it will eventually turn into overtraining syndrome. And overtraining syndrome occurs as a result of chronic overreaching. Short-term overreaching is one of the best methods for gaining either muscle mass or strength in the fewest months possible. It's actually one of the best methods out there because you, again, work off of dual factor recovery models. And what that means is you push yourself to the point to where you are using workloads that you can't recover from till you get close to overtraining, and then you back off, recover, and adapt to all that training. So, for example, I have at least one linear periodization program to where people start with doing like 10 rep sets for 3-week blocks, and they add sets every single week. And then they drop the sets down, add weight, go to 8 rep sets. And they do 3 sets on week 1, 4 sets on week 2, 5 sets on week 3. Same thing, you add weight again, drop the sets back down, drop the reps down. And when they get to that 12th week, they're working with very, very heavy loads, and they've accumulated fatigue over and over. In fact, each 3rd week has been almost an overreaching phase, getting close to overreaching, but then you back off a little bit. But the whole point is that by the end of that 12-week mark, you are clearly into deep overreaching, and therefore you take a full week of recovery to recover from it. And people need to understand that too. Even mild overreaching, short-term overreaching that's only a couple training sessions doesn't always require a full deload. You can sometimes go into a new block of periodization with lower total tonnage, and you will go ahead and recover. All right, but when you're dealing with getting to extreme overreaching to the point to where you will benefit from a deload, such as you do on that program after the 12th week, what most people do, they take a deload. A deload means you, on average, reduce the weight you're using by half. So if you're doing 3 sets of 8 with 200 pounds or 200 kilos, I don't care, it's just a number, you would reduce it down to 100 and do sets of 8. And you might even take a set out. You might do 2 sets of 8 with 100 instead of 3 sets of 8 with 200. And the whole idea is that if you've accumulated enough fatigue through using workloads that are considerably beyond what you could actually recover from, sometimes even week to week, not even just session to session, because that's when you need a deload. You need a deload when you've gotten to the point where you can't recover week to week anymore. That's why in a lot of those periodization models, that 3rd week, you can't recover from the 3rd week from workout to workout, but then 1 week of just backing off a little bit with a new training stimulus, such as a slightly heavier weight but a lot less volume, you'll go ahead and adapt and recover, and you'll grow from it. But when we get to where you can't adapt week to week anymore, we've reached a true overreach state. And the whole point of that is that you can continue to grow off of that for up to 3 weeks, as long as you're re-stimulating the training. And so the whole point with a deload week to where we reduce tonnages by as much as 60 to 70%. I mean, that's what you're doing. If you've gone from sets of 8 with 200 and you drop to 100, you're already cutting your tonnage at half, but then when you start cutting sets out, it drops even further. You're dropping tonnage dramatically, but you are still training and re-sparking protein synthesis. You're reinitiating protein synthesis and protein disruption in the muscle fibers so that it will reinforce those previous weeks of overreaching. And you can do that for about a week and you will actually grow from it. You will get stronger from it. But when people start asking, well, what do I do when I finally have finished that deload week? Do I just need to return to going heavy and hard? And I would say, no, you don't. Because what you need to understand, sometimes it can take more than a week to fully recover from deloading or from a true overreach state. But you know what? Like I've said before, it takes up to 2 weeks to even start to detrain from any training stimulus. So the fact of the matter is, the second full week back, you haven't even started detraining from that last training session in the overreaching week, right? You haven't detrained from it. So if you come back in and you start working with moderately heavy weights and moderate tonnages again, what happens? You haven't detrained from that other session. In fact, you're reinforcing it again. You're reinforcing it. It might not be progressive overload at that point, but you progressively overload for several weeks or months already. You've already done all of that overloading. All right, that's what people need to remember with progressive overload. Progressive overload doesn't require you to get better every single workout. That's how you do noob gains. That's what noobs do. Intermediates and advanced lifters can't do that. It doesn't work that way. But as long as there is a general upward trend, they will continue to gain muscle and strength. It's just going to be slower. But you know what? More advanced lifters can never dream of making noob gains again. So you accept that your gains are going to come slower. But the whole idea is that you have a general upward trend. And you know what? You come back that second week and you go to returning to weights that you use near the start of an overreaching setup to where you started moving towards overreaching. You know what? You're getting some serious muscle protein disruption. You are going to re-stimulate muscle protein synthesis, and because you're within 2 weeks still of your final overreaching week, you haven't detrained from any of that yet. So what ends up happening, you can actually get bigger and stronger during that week, even using quite a bit less weight and tonnage than you might have used when you were overreaching. That's fine for the second week. And then if you increase it on the week after it, even though normally you would start to see some mild detraining start to occur there from any given training session, what ends up happening when you bump the workloads back up a little bit, and you spend the next couple weeks going back up, you're back into progressive overload. It doesn't have to be overreaching, and that's what people need to understand. You only have to progress to more than you needed to grow before. And that's the beauty of it. Progressive overload doesn't mean that you have to hit all-time PRs. It just means that you have to work a little harder than when you had used it before. So let's say you did a 12-week pattern of training to where you were doing 3 sets of 8 with 200 pounds, right, on an exercise. And then you went to 4 sets of 8, then 5 sets of 8 with 200 pounds, right? And then, over the course of a couple months, you overreached and you peaked and you had to deload. Well, if you come back and you do 3 sets of 8 with 205, yes, it might be less tonnage than you had been using just a couple weeks before when you were overreaching. But if you were to go back a couple of months, and remember that, guys, intermediate lifters actually progress month to month. That's what they need to look at. And advanced lifters think about yearly progression. Novice lifters are the ones who worry about workout to workout and week to week having to progress. That's not necessary at the higher levels. But if you were to go back a couple months, 2 or 3 months back to the other phases, if you were doing sets of 8 with 200 pounds and now you're doing sets of 8 with 205, you're actually still seeing progressive overload. It's just that you've only added 5 pounds over 3 months. But you know what? That's still progression. So that 3 sets of 8 with 205 is going to stimulate growth again because you had done it with 200 pounds 3 months ago. All right, 2 or 3 months ago, back at the start of a periodization program. So when you start doing that and then you go to the next week, you increase it. You've either increased weight by 5 pounds or you add a set or whatever the protocol that you're using calls for. you will start to progress again. But the whole point is you don't need to come back the week after a deload and start hitting PRs. All right, you don't need to set new tonnages you've never used before, because you need to understand you have previously overreached. It could take you 2 or 3 weeks to fully recover from the overreaching. The deload's going to handle most of it, but if you were to deload for 2 weeks straight, you'll start to detrain. But if you go back to using moderate weights again, you will sustain the gains from the overreaching phase. The gains that you made during the deload week and the final week of the overreaching, you'll sustain those. That'll be able to hold on. That will be able to hold on to those gains through that training. And then from there, you start gradually progressing, but you don't for a few weeks do anything that you can't recover from workout to workout, because you've just overreached. And then you gradually build your way back up. Gradually build your way back up to another overreaching phase again. But you don't go right back into overreaching 2 weeks after you've had to do a deload, because you will eventually overtrain and you're going to get stalled progress doing that. So that's one of the big mistakes people make, because they know that they should be bigger and stronger after a deload week. Sometimes they want to come back in and test that. They want to test their strength. They want to push their limits. But that will interfere with their total recovery from that previous overreaching. So you need to gradually ease back into it. The same way that you did the first time. Sometimes it took people 10 weeks of training before they started reaching an overreaching phase. There's no reason you can't do that again. And just be 5 pounds heavier on all your lifts in that next phase than you were in the 12 weeks before. All right, that's all you have to do. But you definitely don't want to come back into it and go 100% after a deload. You just overreached. You just had several weeks where you did go 100%. You don't want to do that again immediately. It's not ideal for your progress and for your gains. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.